one and all, welcome to Seen Through Glass. Welcome back to Perth, Australia. Welcome back to the Lee Collection. If you saw my last video, you'll know I'm here in the city, not only to host one of our live podcast events, but also to catch up with these guys, who have potentially the craziest car collection in Australia. In the last video, I updated you on some of the latest additions, but also we took some of their cars up until the hills. Well, I'm bringing you back here once again today because, well, they're giving me a fairly outrageous opportunity. And that's to get behind the wheel of this McLaren P1, one of the original holy trinity of hypercars. Now, it sounds quite ridiculous to say, but I have actually driven a P1 before. Long-term viewers might remember that during Drive the World, I drove one in Canada, but it was quite a short experience. I just drove the car around an industrial estate, and I always felt like I didn't get a proper chance to fully understand what the car's all about. So I've always wanted to have another go, because if you would ask me to pick between the holy trinity, the LaFerrari, the 918, and the P1, well, that would probably be my order of preference. LaFerrari first, 918, and then P1. And maybe that was based on the experiences I had. The 918 was amazing. I really got to crack on in one in New Zealand. The LaFerrari was, I think, even better because I drove it around Marbella in Spain. It just felt like I was the coolest person in the world. And then the P1 was just a really short experience. So I've always thought, well, if I get the chance to really have a go in a P1 and understand it a bit better, would that order change? And today, we're going to find out, yes, because these lunatics, absolute lunatics, are for some reason going to hand me the keys to this car and let me have a proper go. Welcome inside the P1. Now, I have spent quite a bit of time inside McLarens before. I used to own a McLaren 540C. Whilst lots of this is familiar, it's also very different, and it's a freaking P1. This has a reputation for being a little bit leery. I'm a tiny bit intimidated. 900 odd horsepower, 1,000 odd newton meters of torque in a car that weighs 1,500 kilos with the battery. This is going to be an experience. Let's get the ignition on, foot on the brake, and here we go, people! Well, we've got caught in a little bit of traffic leaving the city, so I thought I'd talk you through some of my initial impressions. It's mad to think that this car is now 10 years old. Production of the P1 began in 2013. Time flies when you're having fun or running a YouTube channel. But if you think about it, it was so ahead of its time, this car, because it's taken 10 years for supercars to kind of catch up with this thing and the LaFerrari and the 918. It's only now that we're seeing things like the 1,000 horsepower hybrid Ferrari SF90 and the 1,000 horsepower hybrid Lamborghini Revuelto. So yeah, it's quite mad to think that McLaren, who were a relatively new car company at the time, sorry, McLaren Automotive, came out with this as like their second or third car. And it was immediately regarded as one of the best supercars or hypercars of all time, and still today is super sought after. It does feel special. Like I said, the minute you get in here, you go, okay, McLaren, but there's just little elements, this glass roof, some of the sort of cockpit, or sorry, cabin layout that just makes you go, oh, this is different. Got buttons like DRS and iPass on my steering wheel. Obviously I have the ability to charge up the battery, and I can even go into E mode and just drive in electric. I've only got 2 kilometers of range currently, and I think in total you only get about 5 or 6, so I'm not going to do that right now. Got launch control, race mode, boost. I've got the standard active panel down here. I can switch between my handling and performance modes, normal, sport and track, activate the aero. I mean, it's all quite exciting, I'm going to be honest. But the biggest thing is, like this, at slow speeds, it's like any other McLaren. Super easy to drive, really comfortable. The ride is great. The gearbox is pretty lovely considering its age. Visibility is fantastic. It's all smooth, it's easy. I mean, it's really straightforward. And if you spoke to just a normal person and said, oh, jump behind the wheel of a P1, they'd probably think, what? But yeah, if you're doing slow speeds, it's easy. I can now see like a big fire engine, which makes me think this traffic is to do with an accident. So we could be here a while, but I'm not complaining. It just means more time in a P1. Well, we managed to fight our way out of the city, and you now find us at Mundaring Weir, which is kind of in the hills above Perth. This is where we're going to base ourselves to give me a chance to, well, try and have some fun in the P1. I did start to kind of push on a little bit on the roads that we took to get here from the highway, and oh my god, I don't think I'm ready for when I start to turn this thing up to, well, I'm not going to say 10 because I'm not brave enough and it's not my car, but 6 or 7. But yeah, I didn't even turn on the active panel. I was literally just driving it in standard mode, and already it just takes off like this insane rocket ship. The way it pulls you down the road is quite mind-boggling. But the biggest thing, which I'd forgotten, is the sounds that come from over your shoulder. It's like nothing else. Honestly, the whoosh, the whooshing, the popping, the fizzing, it's like another, it's another worldly experience. Everyone battling to make EV sound exciting. Make them sound like this, because it doesn't sound like an NA, oh, it's not an NA, but it doesn't sound like a combustion engine vehicle. It just sounds totally wild, and that all adds to this exhilarating experience as you actually then hold on for dear life, try not to end up in the bush. Now, remember what I was saying a moment ago about this car kind of feeling like it was ahead of its time? Well, that's becoming more and more clear to me the more time I spend behind the wheel. So you're currently seeing it in its sort of iconic race mode, which really aggressively lowers the car. I mean, look at the front. It looks like some kind of SEMA exhibit. I think it drops the front by something like 38 mil. Obviously raises that massive rear wing. But that's just one of the sort of few things that the computers in this car can do. Even as you make your way through normal sport and track, you can hear things whirring and moving, and systems kind of figuring out how to get the maximum performance, but also, I guess, try and keep you on the road. And you know, these days, modern cars that have the similar sort of power, or similar power trains at least, do have, of course, similar computers, if not even more advanced computers, but they sort of work really in tandem with you. You don't notice so much what's going on. This is raw, it's noisy, it's kind of race car like. When you push a button, you can almost hear a mechanical change. So it feels like you're more involved than maybe some of the newer things that tend to, well, sometimes feel a bit like robots. So yeah, it's absolutely mind-boggling. As I say, 10 years old this car, but feels right up to date with any top-level performance hypercar. And I'm standing here just kind of wasting time. I know I'm babbling on now. That's because I just firstly don't want to lose the moment. Once I get in this car and drive away, that means it's going to start to end this experience. But also, I am still just thinking, what is going to happen when I activate that active panel and start switching things up, considering the drive that I just had. But we're only going to find out one way, so let's jump in, power this thing up and hit the road. Now, I have to apologise because we are driving into a very low sunset, which is creating some pretty horrific reflections in the windscreen. So this point of view angle isn't going to be great, but I really wanted to give you a sense of what it's like to get behind the wheel of a P1, because I am very aware that this is an extremely lucky position that I'm in, and I didn't ever think I'd get a chance to drive a P1 again, and I'm aware that many of you will never even get the chance to see a P1, so hopefully you can live vicariously through me in this moment. I've come out of race mode because, as cool as it looked, let's face it, it wouldn't really have been appropriate on these roads, but I've activated the active panel, and I'm in the sport setting for the handling mode and track setting for performance, so also for power. So yeah, I'm not at 10, but I'm at like 9 or 9.5. And yeah, we're out here on a pretty big, open, flowy and sort of busy road, just to start to stretch the legs of this thing ever so slightly. And there you go, there is the soundtrack that I was alluding to. My God, this thing just sounds so wild. You do still get a whole load of that iconic V8 engine from McLaren, but the turbos, the whooshing, the fizzing as you come off the accelerator, and then all those mechanical noises and the rocks bouncing off the carbon tub, and it's just all going on. What I've realised is when we're not stuck in slow-moving traffic or behind some kind of ute, is that this thing comes alive the faster you go. I don't think there's any road in the world where you would start to see the true potential of this car. You've really got to go on track. If you look back at some of those early track videos from the likes of Jeremy Clarkson, Chris Harris, that's where this car makes sense. But few times today, unfortunately not always on camera, I have just got the car to start giving me an inkling of what it can do. And it's not just about the straight line performance, it's the way not only it turns in, but also it just suckers itself to the ground but I haven't really got into the throttle because, well, that is plenty, and that's about 30% acceleration. I mean, any more than that, I am certain this thing will try and bite my head off. But yeah, it's just a joyous moment and joyous occasion. We have not been fortunate with the traffic today, but we didn't have time on our hands, so we're just taking it as we can get it. But look, I mean, if I just look at the way it darts on the road, I mean, I know that's not the ultimate test of a car's handling, but for me, it just shows me how pointy that front end is, just how much this car wants to move into the corners. So try and drop back a moment, drop back from the A12 comp, give it some breathing space, and then see if we can build up some speed once again. But yeah, so in terms of handling, as I say, sport, not track, it is still fairly firm in the sense that I can feel every single little nook in the road underneath me. But here we go, let's try and launch it up the hill. I know there's people on the hill, but anyway, let's give it a beer. Got to come out of it there, but wave at the kids. Hello. They want me to give it large. Well, the Camry is gone. We've got a clear road. Oh, this is just, look at this moment. Sunset following an 812 competence journey in a bloody McLaren P1. Oh, you know, the crazy thing is obviously these are collector's items now. When they were rare enough back in the day, I think they were always going to be collector's items, but we haven't really seen a follow-up yet from Ferrari, McLaren and Porsche. So these represent the last great hypercars. They were so, as I say, ahead of their time in such limited numbers. The thing is, because their tech was so ahead of its time, it wasn't as advanced as it is today. Therefore, the battery technology a bit dated, and these batteries apparently need replacing. They're very hard to get hold of, very expensive, which means a lot of these cars are just sitting around in collections, not really moving, not really being used, which is such a shame because this thing is wild. So, legends like the Lee collection, oh my god, are just getting out and using this car and putting miles on it, and that is the best thing ever. Still, 10 years later, this is an unbelievably special thing. Well, we're back in the city now, which means my time with this P1 is very nearly over. I'm trying to soak in every last second because God knows when I'm going to drive one of these cars again. It's been an awesome day. I know we got unlucky with a lot of traffic. Whenever the cameras were rolling, we got stuck behind something, but I did get a chance to push on in this car when the cameras weren't rolling, and I do feel like I understand it a little bit better. It's insanely special for what it is, for what it represents. However, the on-road experience is actually very similar to another car, to another McLaren. The 765LT, a car that I often say on the podcast is one of the most underrated and overlooked modern day supercars. I absolutely adore that thing, it's incredible. And I now realise it's very similar to a bloody McLaren P1. Yeah, everyone just seems to ignore it. And look, I'm not saying get an LT instead of a P1. The P1 is special for what it is, for what it was, for what it represents, for the experience. But if you have £350,000 instead of £1 million, you're getting very close. And actually, if you look at lap times, LTs are often quicker than P1s. But you know, you could say that for a 488 over an Enzo, so I'm not picking the 488 over an Enzo. The P1 is a P1, but it just has really reminded me of the 765LT, and that's kind of mad because yeah, this car came out around the 675LT, so a whole generation before. It's been eye-opening. How would I rate the 3 or the Holy Trinity now? I think the same. LaFerrari 918 P1. This thing is awesome. It's probably bottom of the list just because of where my heart lies with the other brands. Nothing to do with the way it performs. And look, if anyone out there is mad enough to lend me one of these cars on track, I'd be there in a heartbeat, because I think that's where this thing would come alive. What an amazingly special day. Huge thanks to the Lee Collection. These guys are just unreal. Wraps up our trip to Australia. Our big adventure down under is now over, which means we've got to head back to the pouring rain and probably not McLaren P1s, 812 Competitiones and GT Black Series. But oh well, I hope you've enjoyed all the videos. Give it a thumbs up if you have. Stay subscribed, because some probably rainy videos are on their way.